and the implications. Okay, I have to start over. We've been talking all along about the settlement and the implications associated with the settlement, right? And how we're going to proceed. So even though the today's meeting is supposedly about the representation agreements, I think more importantly, preceding that, we want to see exactly what the general public is saying. So over the weekend, there were 3 different articles in the Orange County Register, and whether they're in Orange County Register, somebody like me continues to read, or other platforms, it's all over. And it's interesting how many people, potential clients, are aware of what's taking place. But the people themselves, based on these articles, both the agents who are interviewed in many cases and the potential clients have no idea what this means to them. So I thought we would just go through some of the aspects of these articles that I just read so you have a better idea what the general public is thinking, so you can be better prepared to address any questions that they're going to have, because they're going to have questions, whether you initiate it by asking them to sign a representation agreement, or they themselves initiate that because they've seen information and everybody's expecting to save money, especially sellers. So I'm not going to read these articles to you, but I did highlight certain things for myself to just cover with you so you can get a feel for what's taking place. Thanks, John. So in this one particular article that was from Saturday, I believe, just recent, let's see. Yeah, Saturday. Perfect timing for us because I'd say this is very helpful. So when I look at this article, the excerpts that are important to me, it says, nevertheless, Nicholas Rosen of Castro Valley is still having a hard time getting agents to explain what will happen when he lists his home for sale. At this point, I have more questions than answers. I'm really not sure how the settlement will affect me, said Rosen, who's an attorney. I wanted to ask what would be in place of that traditional fee. Would it be a negotiated rate? Would it be a flat fee? The answer was not forthcoming from the agent. So what should your answer be? If you're representing a buyer or working with a buyer, you must have a signed representation agreement in which there is a stipulated fee, and it can't be a moving target either. And you can't be paid any more than what's on that representation agreement. And that's something you need to be able to explain to them. Before I work with you, and there's an exception here associated with Zillow, which I think is completely illegal. Before I show you a home and work with you, I must have to sign a representation agreement. So the representation agreements now can be for specified properties. Maybe you're a listing agent and somebody wants you to represent them simply for that offer or for that property. It could be a wide-ranging agreement, an exclusive agreement. It's interesting. One of the revisions of the exclusive agreements we talked about for buyer representation allowed us to check a box saying during the term, you can't cancel that agreement. And the term can't be for more than 90 days, but you can extend it. But now that's been removed completely. So either party, even for the exclusive representation agreement, can give a 30-day notice to terminate that relationship. If you choose non-exclusive, the default is upon written receipt of cancellation. So those are things you need to be aware of. I think the discussion is when you're speaking to somebody, the agreement itself is only for 90 days, and 90 days is just such a short period of time. But even with the exclusive representation, either party can give a 30-day notice to terminate the relationship. That's nothing when we're talking about a search. That should be something that you should be pushing for. I would avoid any type of non-exclusive arrangements. Maybe you're a listing agent and they just want you to represent them. That's a possibility. You could then have just an arrangement for that particular property. But I think what you should be saying to them is 30 days is nothing. How long have you been living where you are? Why would you accept anything else? And not only that, when we go through some of these articles, it's very interesting. Agents, one of the writers is saying, agents probably won't pay any attention to you or are more likely to give you better service if you give an exclusive agreement. Why would you waste your time on somebody? And that's the point I think you want to convey, not in those harsh words, but conveying to that buyer when you're signing that representation agreement, that I'm going to give you complete and service. I'm going to take care of you, and no agent is going to spend any time representing you. I think there was always a dilemma in the past before these representation agreements were really widely used. how many agents always worked, but then, buyers then weren't loyal. So that's an issue. So that's my thought about that. You have to be prepared. And I think that's what we're gearing ourselves towards, being prepared to address these questions, because there are going to be a lot of questions. And everybody's going to be coming at you from the perspective of them being able to save money.
I think the out makes it appealing too, being able to cancel.
It does.
Where
You know,
before
that
you were
out,
locked
you know,
in.
you're only locked in. You could we could sign a contract today. In 30 days, you could terminate it because you don't like me. I can't. I know what you're saying, Marianne. Nobody here doesn't like me, or nobody here likes me. I'm not sure what. And then the other aspects for sellers and for buyers, seller offers to buyer agents can no longer be made in a multiple listing service. So as of August 13th, if there was compensation that was offered, that field is going to be eliminated. There's a concession field, which can be a dollar amount, it can be a percentage, but it's non-binding. So keep that in mind. That has to be negotiated in the contract itself. So that's something important for sellers. What's important for you, if you're a listing agent and you've taken a listing contract before the most recent revision, because the most recent revision has nothing in there in terms of asking the seller to pay the buyer's compensation. But under prior listing contract, which is just a week ago or so at most, there's a provision in regards to you making a concession, or the seller wants you to offer so much on the MLS. So I have a 5% listing. I'm offering 2%. You may have memorialized that in the listing contract. Maybe you didn't, you left it blank. You don't have to listen to this. But if you said, I'm going to be offering 2% to the cooperating broker, you're going to be required to modify that contract, because no longer is that contract or that aspect valid. And you're required to modify that listing contract to indicate that you can no longer offer compensation on the multiple listing service. And then the discussion is going to be in that form. Do you just want to give me the money because you like me? No one's saying yes. Or are we just going to reduce the total commission you're paying? But that discussion should also be, you should be prepared mentally for all buyers to ask you to pay the commission.
Rich, can I ask the question?
Yeah.
In regards to the MLS, and right now it's on there, and you have the 2% showing what you're paying, that's what you're offering. On the 13th, is it just the line going to disappear?
It's gone.
Even
it's gone.
On the one that you have already?
Absolutely, unless it's pending, on hold, withdrawn, or closed. For historical purposes only, but if you go from pending to active, then it's going to be eliminated. So big change there. And then someone asked me previously, and I think I gave a wrong answer. There's no reason for the audience to react to that. Wouldn't be the first time. But I was asked, what takes place if I made an offer on a property in which there was compensation offered on the multiple listing service, and then suddenly it disappears? Well, Carr is suggesting, and it's not as if this is a written rule, that if you have an accepted contract, the obligation to pay the commission will be binding. So that means anything less than an accepted contract may not be binding if you don't have a commission agreement in writing.
They're saying you froze on Zoom.
I did.
You logged into the 5G.
I don't know.
You're not able to
I'm moving. See, that's me.
No, I mean, but at home, I'm not sure if that's.
Oh, you can't hear me? Is that what they're saying?
Can you guys hear Rich?
Yes.
Anyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I can see as well.
You can? Okay. All right. Thank you. And then, of course, people are being quoted about there being a lot of confusion. That's a real surprise. Clients could be more confused than we are. Let me continue.
Richard, a little question.
What's that?
Let's say this is August 21st, and you offer for a property, you do an offer. So you in the offer you add that the new form but you also can put as a part of the offer, like commission for the buyer's agent, like seller to pay 3% of list, like you used to do, but do it in an addendum or something like that.
Yeah, in the purchase contract, there's a line item. You check the box stating that the buyer's requesting the seller to pay the buyer's agent's commission. And it would attach form SPBB, seller payment of buyer's broker. And in that, you can specify how much, this is the negotiation between the buyer and the seller. The buyer's requesting that the seller pay buyer's broker in whatever amount it is. But in no case, regardless of where that compensation comes from, can the amount that you will receive will exceed the amount in the buyer representation agreement, form BRBC, PS something else, the property showing addendum. You have to forgive me if I don't remember them all. So hopefully that answers your question. Yes, you will submit the offer. The buyer's requesting that the seller pay the buyer's broker. And you'll specify how much. And then at the close of escrow, you'll be required to submit what is suggested as page 4, for example, of the buyer representation broker compensation agreement, is that is a irrevocable demand on the buyer to pay the commissions. I see you wincing, Carlos. Is there something wrong?
Jeff was asking a question.
Okay. Now, before we go on, did I answer your question, Carmenza?
Yes, perfect, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, thanks. It is. And with that BRBC, that representation agreements, or the limited one, it's irrevocable, correct?
So it still is okay to request for it.
And what do you mean request for it?
On an offer,
Mm-hmm.
purchasing offer, say that the seller pay for the commission.
Yeah, two separate aspects. So the first step would realistically be you, if you're representing the buyer, to have a buyer representation broker compensation agreement. And it says how much the buyer is obligated to pay you. Then when submitting the offer on behalf of the buyer, you would check the box under the RPA and attach the seller payment of buyer broker addendum, in which the buyer is asking the seller to pay the buyer's broker. So it's going to require both. Actually, yes,
The seller didn't agree, the buyer still has to obligate.
that is correct. So maybe you have an agreement with your client in which the buyer is going to pay you 2.5%, but the seller is only willing to pay 1.5%. Then the buyer has to pay the difference, which is 1% in that example. But of course, in one of the articles we're going to review is that the person who's the lender is suggesting go to the agent, ask the agent to come up with that difference. So those are things, and it's probably no different than what we see today in regards to buyers asking agents to make a contribution or give them a credit. But that's what we're seeing also in regards to what's being advertised out there, suggested.
So as a seller agent, I still can go with the same commission as it was before.
You can do that. You can take a listing contract and charge 6%, and you have no obligation to offer anything.
And from that, I can offer to my buyer.
That is, you can ask anything to anyone. Okay, so if you want to, ask Trump or Biden, you can ask anything. But sometimes they never listen. So technically we can ask them, but in my opinion, it's just a waste. You better work for the buyer to make the buyer exclusive. In seller side, there are no reason to do, paying the commission to the buyer agent, except no one purchased the property. No one wanted to purchase the property. So I think anyway, it doesn't work. So you don't have to waste it. It is just wasting time. If you are trying to make an offer with the seller paying my commission, and then another one is the buyer pays the buyer agent commission. They don't ask. Then what's the reason for the seller's agent choose your offers? There's no reason. So it means anyway it doesn't work. you're gonna waste more time because you're gonna fill out the offer, then you have to search out another property, you have to ask for gain. You know what I'm saying? So in my opinion, just rule is a rule, you can ask anything to anyone. But sometimes possibly 90% work, sometimes possibly 90% doesn't work. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, my question was that,
I remember. So yes, you can. You could pay compensation to the buyer's broker if you're the listing agent and no obligation to. But obviously, something Carlos pointed out to me, you sign a 6% listing with somebody and there's no obligation of them or you to offer anything to the cooperating broker. And then the buyer's agent comes in and asks for the seller to pay 2%. If you haven't had a discussion with that seller, it's probably going to be a very awkward moment for you in time. If that makes sense to you, right? You charge them 6%, and it's probably the seller's expectation. You're going to be offering that cooperating broker a portion of that compensation, contractually, you have no obligation to.
Yeah.
It's probably misleading.
do you recommend that at this time?
Mhm.
I only ask for my own commission, not the buyer?
I don't know what the best approach is at this point in time. I think I'm anxious to see exactly what sellers' expectations are. And some of the people that are quoted in these articles I'm going to just go over, there were 13 out of 15 of the respondents said, I will not likely pay the buyer's agent's commission. So if that's the mindset for sellers, then I think that answers the question, right? They're not going to want to pay the buyer's agent's commission. So when you're on a listing presentation and you're making a recommendation that you offer a concession or compensation to the buyer, are they going to choose you or the next person says, oh no, you don't have to pay the buyer's broker? So going through that discussion, I'm probably less likely to ask the seller to pay anything because or to give me a 6% listing. I'm probably more likely to say I want a 3% listing, which is difficult to get as a listing agent as it is to get 3% on any listing contract. And then allow the buyers to come in and make their offer and ask the seller to pay the compensation. Now, in the listing contract itself, I'll be right with you, Julia. The new listing contract, there's just a box that says, would you consider offering a concession? Yeah, would you consider? It means nothing.
Why did you say that it is very hard to get a 3% listing?
Well, actually, what I'm seeing quite often, there's the exception, but around here, our total listing contracts were rarely at 6%. And so typically what I'm saying is that usually the listing agent will split the compensation or the commission that the seller is willing to pay. So if it's a 5% listing, it's 2.5% to the buyer's agent, 2.5% to the listing agent. Now the market dictates that, but the expectations is all of these articles is suggesting that everybody pays a seller pays 5 to 6% of the listing price. And that's just not true, at least not what I'm seeing. Yes, there are those individuals that are successful doing that, but for the most part, on average, it's less than that. So now 3% sounds inviting to a seller. I don't want to pay 3%. I don't have to pay 6% is in these articles, or 5% is stated in the articles. They're going to pay it anyways. That's my thinking. They're going to pay it only if the buyer's agent is good at negotiating the buyer representation agreement with the buyer. So I'm sorry, you had a question?
Yes, if, can we take like a conditional listing if we end up paying the buyer agent, the commission is 6%, but if not, then commission only 3%, for example.
Well, on a
And it
listing,
Fell out in a listing.
yeah, a listing, you can make it conditioned upon with the seller, certain events or dollar amounts, but on a buyer representation agreement, it has to be a specified amount. It's a
No,
dramatic
I'm talking
difference.
the sellers.
I understand, but I just wanted to point out the difference. So in a listing contract, yeah, you can specify something that's not definitive per se, like 2%. You can actually predicate it upon something like that. I don't see why you can't. But go ahead.
Yeah, and can we put in the agent's remarks that seller considering paying buyer's commission?
No, no reference, no link that shows compensation. You're gonna be fined $2,500.
Okay, so like,
Yeah.
you only can verbally talk to the other agent, like somebody calling you, I want to make an offer on your listing, and you tell them, oh, yes, and you can ask for commission.
Yes, and you can advertise it in your advertising, whatever you do. It can't be on anything associated with an IDX website in terms of offer of compensation. And if you put in the private remarks, click this link and the compensation shows up, that's a violation. Yes, Jay.
Guys, you know what, don't be too complicated, okay? There was only two ways, two things, that we have to worry about it. On listing agreement, how do we get, a higher commission? You know what, 3% is better than 2%, 4% is better than 3%, 5% is better than 4%, 10% is better than 9%. Okay, so how do we get the higher commission and the lower price of the listing price? That is only one side. The other side, then from now that we have to get the buyer exclusive, right? Just to consider about how do you get the higher commission. Okay, so the 3% is better than 2%, and the 4% is better than 3%. Just if you can make a 10%, it's excellent. Right? So the only concern about how to get a higher commission, and then how to make the higher price offer. That's it. Well, I really can't understand, why you guys complicated about this way, why seller pay, buy pay. There is only two agreements: listing agreement, buy exclusive. The listing agreement, higher listing, the higher commission, and then low price. Then the buy exclusive, higher commission, make higher offer. That's it. So don't make something else, inside of them. Anyway, it doesn't work. My opinion.
You sounded so simple.
Yeah, it's very simple, very simple. This is beginning of working. Without listing agreement, we cannot sell the property, right? Now, without the buy exclusive, we cannot work for the buyer. It's just the beginning. Without that one, we cannot work. So why you guys put something happen, what happened, something happened, what happened, don't think of too much, So this is very simple. So we have to more and more focus for about the strong listing presentation, more strong for the buyer's presentation. That's it. So don't be complicated, it become very simple. I'm really happy for this new system. Seriously.
Me too.
Would Jay be open to like doing a buyer consultation class?
Jay, did you hear that? Would you be open to doing a buyer consultation class?
I tried to make it, last month, actually, I tried to, do it in the end of July, my plan. So I just make a surprise, there, but I still not done.
So the answer is yes, he's just not completely prepared at this point in time. Would that be fair? He didn't say yes, but we're trying to convince him.
Much for
Mhm.
airplane, much driving. So,
Yeah.
so it was super busy the last. I will try.
He will try to do that. That's what he's committed to. I think that's right. So
Jim had a question. If the buyers don't have the cash to pay their agent, can the lender cover buyer's brokerage fee?
well, in the listing contract, which I don't have in front of me, there is a box that states, does the buyer have sufficient money to pay the buyer's broker? And if they check the box, they may not have to pay anything, but let's see, the buyer's can the lender cover the buyer's brokerage fees? Well, I don't know about that. Here's what I am going to say. There's a difference. Well, Sarah and I talked about this yesterday. So there's a difference. You can use a concession or amount that's coming back from the seller to pay the buyer's closing costs. including commissions, right? But what if we exceed the thresholds? And I asked Sarah to join this meeting today. She has information in regards to what the max concessions could be from a seller. But you can also not include the buyer's brokerage's commissions as a buyer paid cost. So it doesn't affect the threshold for concessions. And the seller can pay the buyer's broker's commissions directly. So it's not falling under that credit. That's a good negotiation, right? You, Mr. Seller, I want you to give me concessions. You, Mr. Seller, I want you to pay my buyer's broker, my broker, and I don't want to use my concessions to cover that. So will a lender cover the buyer's brokerage's fees? I don't think so. I don't think so. Sarah, are you there?
It might get creative.
Is Sarah connected?
I thought I saw her.
Okay, or Sarah, can you answer that? Or John Sheehan, can you answer that? Sarah?
I would have to say no. And the reason is just because where is the lender going to get that money? Oftentimes when we're pricing out a loan for a borrower, there used to be a time where we could get a lot of rebate that would help cover the borrower's closing costs. But, to put that in perspective, we're talking about like a credit of maybe up to 1%. And that's usually enough to cover, the escrow and title fees would not be enough to cover the commission. And now since with the increase in interest rates, that credit that the lender used to give has shrunk. So there isn't enough money that the lenders are getting in order to pay any type of commission.
So it might be possible, but there's no money anyways. That's what you're saying.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully that answers your question, Jim. You have a question, Masood?
No, I just wanted to add, probably at some point down the line, lenders might incorporate something like that, to attract more buyers. And then they can just.
But they can't under the current laws. The Dodd-Frank Act, that's the problem.
Might say, they'll just add, if that's a law.
Yeah, that's the problem, unless that's amended. And then let's see, this at the very bottom of this, the second column from the right. Different expectations. Home sellers have different expectations. I'm sure it's going to say estate agents, right? Especially after reading headlines saying 6% commission rates are going away. I love hearing this over and over again. And I agree with Jade. Your emphasis shouldn't be on commissions, but everybody has this expectation anyways that they're going to pay 6%. Let's not emphasize it, but this is just the way it is. And nothing is really changing. But this is interesting. This is where I got this quote from before. 13 out of 15 sellers responding online said they may not pay the buyer's commission when they sell their home. And of course, there's a person in there that's saying he philosophically disagrees with the structure of the seller paying the buyer's way. And he said, this is very important to me. Agents push back on Hoff's position. One of the 3 agents he interviewed warned, if you don't offer the buyer's agent money, they may not show the house. That has got to be one of the dumbest things I continue to hear. Why would you ever tell anybody that? I think what we should be telling them is that if the buyer knows you're not going to pay the buyer's agent's commissions, the buyer has no interest in seeing your house. Because no matter what, Mr. Seller, the buyer has a contract with that buyer's broker obligating them to pay the commission if you don't. So never say that, because all this agent is saying is it's all about me. It doesn't matter about anything else. So it's always the buyer. And I believe that. I think buyers may start asking you, well, is the listing or the seller offering any compensation to offset what I'm paying you? Because that might be a part of your discussion with the buyer when you're having that representation agreement signed. I'm going to negotiate on your behalf to ask the seller to pay my commissions, but there's no assurance. Yeah, hi, Joanne.
How about if when you're making an offer in your cover letter, you say we're offering 100,000, but we really need to get our commission financed into the price. So if you pay the buyer's commission, then it's 110,000 and you pay 10,000 in commissions. Spell it out for the seller.
Well, I think that's a negotiation. I don't think that's a prohibition. If that's what you're asking.
But if it doesn't appraise, it buyer sells.
Yeah, well, sellers don't think that because it's interesting. The same article, the seller says, well, if I'm gonna pay the buyer's agents commissions, I'm gonna charge more money. That's exactly what she's appealing to. That kind of mindset. Well, if I'm gonna pay their commissions, I want more money for the home. They're not sitting there saying, I'm concerned about the appraised value coming in. Now, if it's a good listing agent, then the listing agent should be advising the seller of that. I don't know why you couldn't do that, Julia.
Can I just add, I had a case, but it was opposite, I kind of negotiated price down, and the seller told me, if the buyer wants this price, they have to pay the commission. So it's easy, and I told my buyer, I said yes, and I got to actually negotiate a little more, and then buyer was happy, and then he said the commission.
That is really different. Really.
So here it is. This, yeah.
Assuming I'm a seller agent and I just got a commission for myself, 3% or 2.5%, whatever. And the agent called me and wanted to know that if they are willing to pay the commission. The buyer is willing to pay the commission. So at that time, it's okay to say it on the phone or say it, they would give a credit toward the closing.
It's a seller's choice.
Yeah, it's the seller's choice in that case. I'm kind of confused in terms of. So your listing agent, you're getting 3%, and the seller nor you are offering any compensation to the buyer's broker.
Yeah, but
So it is like, okay, someone make an offer, right? Someone make offer, you are seller, I'm agent, but someone make offer. Then, they ask me they want to get a commission, right? That's what you ask me. So it's not your business.
okay, so
It's
I
not
can
my
just
business,
say that
okay,
you can put
okay.
the offer and see.
Yeah, if you just, ask me what the 5% commission, buy agent,
Mhm.
as commission, it's a big difference. I already got a listing.
Yeah,
for my.
It doesn't matter, right?
So this is, the seller's, the choice. So seller and, the buyer. So we can ask to them, hey, this chip, the buyer agent ask, to you say the commission. Then, if she say, yes, okay, my client will say, yes, then pay. If you say no, my client will say no. That's it.
Yeah.
No, that's what I am asking.
Yeah.
Knowing, assuming that I know I had a conversation with my client before. So it is okay to say it on the phone? That it's okay?
To offer compensation on the phone, but for the
because
buyer's
some-
broker to ask the listing agent.
Because sometimes
Yes.
agents, before they do the offer,
Mhm.
they talk to other agents.
Uh-huh.
So they just wanted to see that if there are other offers, if a client.
You're entitled as a buyer's broker to ask the listing agent if the listing agent is going to offer compensation or if the seller is willing to entertain it. Okay, yeah, is that?
Yes, so I can say that, yes.
Yes, you can say that, Jay. Ask him.
Ask me for so if you have the buyer agent, ask me, or me, ask me.
Okay, I have a buyer that is interested in your property, but I wanted to know that your seller is willing. One of the questions is that your seller is willing to pay some credit towards the closing costs or paying the buyer commission.
Okay, you know what, so make an offer and then write down detail on your offer, then I will ask. Then, probably, I don't know,
So you won't say it until they do that.
yeah, after, we have to work with the document, we don't have to work with the phone. Just, so send them your offer, and then, I will ask to the seller, it's not my business, seller will decide yes or no.
That's a good answer. I don't know if everybody heard Jay's answer, but the question was, if I submit an offer, and I want to submit an offer, I call the listing agent because I want to know if the seller or the listing agent is willing to offer compensation to cover the buyer's commissions. Jay's response was, submit your offer and I'll find out. Why would you say anything negative to prevent them from submitting that offer? I think that's really what it comes down to. Yes, send that offer and I'm going to work on your behalf. And here it is. I have to quote these things. This is so interesting to me, and this is probably representative of many people's mentality. But this individual, Lake Forest, who is in the process of listing his 4-bedroom house of 21 years, said if he ends up paying a buyer's commission, I'm just going to ask for more money. Yeah, I think it's just going to be a common response, and that's okay, right? And then let's say, and then the same individual, going down farther, he's willing to pay the buyer's commission himself when he buys his next house in the Inland Empire, which is a very interesting concept. I didn't expect that, as buyers have just been accustomed to thinking that they're not paying anything. It's already built into the price. But I think that's going to be the mindset possibly of a lot of people. That's probably representative. They're going to expect to have to pay for that representation. Curious to say something?
Yeah, I had 2 buyers already explained, and then they are willing to pay the buyers stuff, like an agent commission.
Yeah. See, there you go.
They signed?
Huh?
They signed the contract?
Not yet. Yeah,
I
no.
I signed one contract.
Did you? Fantastic. And leases. Now you're actually going to make some money in a lease as opposed to some asshole saying I'm only going to pay you $25 for representing the buyer, right? Why would you work for anything less than, I don't know what the percentage is that's good for you, but it's going to be a lot more than what some of these property managers offer for some of these properties that are on the marketplace. Excuse me. That's the reason I didn't want some of this to be public. So the next article, which I thought is very interesting, that I think this is what people are reading. This is on the front page of the business section of the Orange County Register. So how will the new real estate rules work? Now, I think most people, I don't get bored with this stuff, but most people are not going to plow through the entire article. They're going to see something like this, so they're going to at least be aware. And that's what we're finding, as a matter of fact. The people are aware, at least, that there are changes. Some are much more informed than others. But I just wanted to go through with you what I thought were some of the more important points of this article, so you can be mentally prepared when someone starts questioning you about this. So you don't want to be in a position that you can't answer these questions. Otherwise, you've lost any hope of working with somebody. So it talks about August 13th. As being the start date. It will be here. It's already started in the Big Bear MLS, by the way. So here it's going to be the 13th of August. The agreement throughout all MLSs will be the 17th, but for us, it's the 13th. And it states in the very first paragraph, most Southern California home shoppers will need to sign contracts with agents to view properties for sale, binding them to paying their own commissions if they can't get a seller to cover it. And home sellers will be banned from advertising how much they're willing to pay buyers agents in a multiple listing service or MLS. So Jay, when you're taking a listing contract, is your discussion going to consist of, Mr. Seller, are you willing to offer any compensation? Or are you just going to say, I'm going to list this house for you for X%?
I'm gonna list the house.
Okay.
I don't like it talk too much.
Okay.
Just to make it simple.
Make it simple, right? Don't get into those discussions.
Yeah, if some happen come up, then we can figure out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for example, we put on market, and then no one purchased the property during the 60 days, and then some buyer agent asked me to, the 1-day commission, and then I can ask to settle.
Okay. No, simplify it. No, I think that's a good suggestion. So Jay's suggesting, why even get into that discussion? I would, that means also on the listing contract where the question is, are you willing to offer a concession, which has got to be one of the dumbest things I've seen. That's what we're paying for. Maybe somebody from NAR Cars watching this. I hope they are. Why would you even ask such a question? It's meaningless. All it is a negative connotation when you're going through a listing contract. I'm going to tell you money. Yes?
So I know Jay's going to make it simple by just saying, okay, I'm going to list your house for 3% or whatever. But what if the seller comes up, but but all this ruling, how does it affect with my sale? Like, what are my obligations? Or can you explain this better, how it has changed and affected the listing? Do you go into it or?
Well, I think if he's suggesting that if you're asked the questions, then yes, you would address it, but you wouldn't do anything to initiate that discussion during a listing presentation. Jay, am I speaking on is that correct in regards to what you're thinking is? You're going to simplify the listing presentation. If they ask those questions, obviously you're going to address that. Are you wondering what his response would be?
Yeah, it'll be nice to know.
So Jay, if somebody asks you, now I'm the seller and I'm aware of the litigation and that I no longer have to offer compensation to the buyer's agents, what do you think I should do? Because I can't offer money to them. What would you suggest?
Well, what do you mean?
So I'm the seller, and you said I only have to pay you 3%, but I know that I no longer am paying the buyer's broker. So, but if I want to attract more buyers, if I offer something, do you think that might be helpful? What would you do? What would you suggest?
그러니까 셀러들이 문제가 바뀌어가지고 안 했다 그러면 문제되는데 스트레스를 뭐냐고 얼바이스를 물어보면 셀러한테 답변을 해주는 거예요. 그러니까 바이어하고 컨설테이션을 어떻게 하시고?
We have. So why do I have? 갑자기 돈을 가르는 거?
아니 그러니까 이제 이게 바뀌었는데 이거를 어떤 식으로 핸들하는 게 제일 좋겠습니까? 손님이 거를 이전한테 들어오면 답변이 어떻게 돼요?
춤 자체 이게 뭘 어떻게 해?
그러니까 줘야 되는 거냐 안 줘야 되는 거냐?
이건
바이어스 에이전시. 그러니까 셀러리 이제 얼바이스를 들어보는 거죠.
근데 거기 생각보다
그런 일이 있을 수 있죠, 선생님. 단순한 셀러면은 시키는 대로 하겠습니다. 어떻게 하는 게 좋겠습니까? 그런 식으로.
you know what? Oh, okay. I don't feel it is just in just in common sense.
Mhm.
But some, the seller can ask to about it. Then I can say just simply, it is your choice. It is his choice. I'm not a decision maker. So buyer agent ask for the commission.
Mm-hmm.
Then then seller is going to decide. Okay, for example, 1.5 million offer, and then they want to get buyer agent want to get a commission for 10%. Okay, and then the other offer is $600,000 offer, and then they do not need a commission, and then what the seller is going to decide 1.5 million and 10% commission because he make more money.
Mm-hmm.
If there are two offers. So it is their choice.
Okay.
They very simply, they make more money, they're money.
Yeah. So Jay is saying it's their choice.
Yeah.
Really, what it comes down to. That's going to be his first response.
I mean, I'm really complicated. Why people are complicated?
We're going to ask you to put on a listing presentation, Jay, so we can all learn how to remove some of the complexity that we instill in these things. All right, Julia.
Question, like, can we put seller agree to pay 2% buyer's closing costs? And that already implies that the seller.
I would say it's not binding because it's.
Yeah, it's only but it's just in a comment, but the buyer, I believe that bribery works. And this is a bribery to the agent and to the buyer. Okay, the seller is willing to pay something. So
Well, there's the concession field, which you can offer a fixed dollar amount or a percentage.
Yeah, and especially in the first 6 months after we're gonna look at the convention, it's gonna be really complicated how we're gonna look at the comps. will include, assuming 2.5% commission that paid by the seller before.
Well, before, appraisers never looked at commissions. Now, the concessions field is going to be much more explicit. And one of those line items is going to be the buyer's broker's commissions,
Yeah.
if the
but
seller pays
like,
for it.
when reviewing comps, is
Uh-huh.
it gonna be like elevated, or we would need to look at every single listing and comment?
Well, I'd say you're gonna have to. That's what an appraiser is going to do. They're gonna look at the amount paid by the seller for the buyer's broker's commissions.
And isn't it our job as an agent to educate the seller and explain to them that before it was built in and now it's separated? So if they were asking 100,000 and you're asking 100,000 now and you're not planning to pay commission, you're asking more than the comp.
Maybe that's part of your sales presentation.
Yeah.
But you should also notify them that it's likely that the buyer is going to request that the seller pay the buyer's broker's commissions. So, yeah. Sellers aren't going to just get away with anything. I don't think it's going to, I think really what it comes down to is the seller's going to, they should be looking at, what am I going to net? Not what the gross selling price is, but how much money am I walking away with based upon the offer? Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what makes sense.
That should be your emphasis in any type of listing presentation, but it's not how much commission you're paying, because no one's going to work for free, and the buyers are obligated to have a contract now. You're gonna say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little more context.
Mhm.
It depends on the property as well, you know, so if the property sits in the market and it's not selling, maybe that would be a conversation you could have with seller, you know, why don't we just offer something, you know, if they're not offering. But if it's a seller market, obviously all the sellers won't pay buyer's commission, so, you know, this is already attractive and then they can attract more buyers.
You know, I would say, here's the counterpoint to that. If I have a listing that's been sitting on the market for 90 days, and now suddenly I add a concession, and an agent sees that, aren't they gonna sense weakness also? I don't know, price drops, so things like that, to get around it, I'm probably more likely to just reduce the price. But still, it's something you can do. I'm not suggesting we don't do that. I don't know if I'd be willing to go into a seller and say, you should give consideration to offering a concession or paying the buyer's broker's commission. That's a discussion that's gonna happen later when I get an offer. Because we really don't know what that offer is gonna consist of. I'm 99% sure.
Yeah, so why even put it out there that the seller's offering a
I
commission?
don't see any reason to put it out there.
Just
It's the
Submit your
price.
offer.
Yeah, it's the
Submit your
price.
offer and then,
Isn't that what people are looking at anyways from the MLS? Or said they're in a gateway and they're within a certain price range. This is what I'm interested in. If the price doesn't fit in there, then I'm not interested because I don't qualify or whatever those cases may be. Even though I'm getting a concession, it doesn't mean I qualify because the price is elevated because of those concessions that are being offered.
On the one thing that Masood said, as far as changing from not offering compensation to offering compensation, that's not gonna show up on the MLS and almost nobody will notice it because it's more behind the scenes. So it probably won't do much good. You've gotta, I would say, lower the price to get someone to look at it again.
Yeah.
Because that's almost invisible to 80 or 90% of the people looking to buy a house. They don't even know that's going on. So that's something to think about.
So I just want to continue with the things that I think most buyers or anyone who's interested in real estate would have read. And then, of course, how will it change under the sentiment? Well, NAR is going to ban offers of compensation to buyers agents in an MLS. So you can still advertise it anyway outside of the MLS, right? And then all home buyers, this is good. And I think these articles are very beneficial for us. All home buyers working with a licensed MLS member, and it doesn't mean a realtor anymore, but anyone who's a subscriber to the MLS must sign a contract before that agent can begin showing them homes. So before you show property, the exclusions are, if I have an open house, you might let them through the property. You must have a contract that specifies the amount of compensation, a definitive amount of compensation that you're going to earn. Otherwise, it may not be enforceable. It can't be a graduated scale, things like that in the buyer compensation agreement. Now, I just want to point this out. Apparently, Zillow, always clever, came out with a pretty, let's see, let me find this shit. I guess I don't have it here. Zillow came out with some kind of a touring agreement for 1 week that's being publicized that people can use. Now, I read it. I read other people's opinions of it. It does not seem to comply with the NAR settlement because it does not in any way specify any amount of compensation. It says, I can just show you homes for a week. So I would suggest if somebody does approach you with that, yeah, there may be other forms, but what is your response going to be? Because apparently EXP came out with a buyer representation agreement, which somebody found to be more understandable. Well, if someone asked me about that, I don't know if they actually would. Has that been through the litigation process and approved? And I would say accepted by all parties. So we have an agreement that is beneficial to both us and more importantly to you, Mr. Consumer, something that's going to be fair to you. And that is the most important thing out of all this settlement. We are asking them to sign these things. You can cancel after 30 days if it's exclusive. If it's not exclusive, unless I change the terms, you can cancel tomorrow or today.
And bottom line, if you don't buy anything, they don't pay anything.
Right, but that's the other thing, because that questions come up in terms of what can compensation consist of? It can consist of per showing an hourly rate, and I don't think anybody's going to agree to that anyways, right? Nobody wants to actually pay. So you're not paying unless we close something. That's really what it comes down to.
So
And that's what you're paying for.
Sorry.
Yes.
So there's this person who wants to lease his house, and he has this ridiculous price that we cannot lease it at. And so I want to be able to put in the agreement that, okay, fine, this is going to be the lease agreement, listed lease agreement percentage, but every month that I'm not able to lease your house, I need to have a certain fee that you would be responsible for because my time is involved in showing this house. Because can I put that in there?
Sure, that listing contracts, there's nothing relegating any type of compensation you may wish to charge for a listing of property. It's just, and it doesn't have to be specified clearly, like a percentage of the dollar amount. Only the buyer representation agreement has that limitation. So you can be as creative as you want in a listing contract.
Call it a fee schedule, right?
You can call it anything you want. Same thing, that's really what it comes down to. You can be broad. It just has to be definitive. I'm going to charge you, if I'm representing a buyer, $100 an hour. It just must be definitive. That's what the requirement is.
About buyer or the tenant, it's just about me just doing your listing. Even if I don't land up leasing your house, I still need to be paid because you've been unreasonable with your price.
I don't see anything wrong with that. Right. You're going to ask me to spend time, money, and effort and not pay me anything because you're unreasonable. That's another discussion after asking that much. So I would never suggest, well, of course, it's hard for me to say never take a listing, even though sellers may overprice them or landlords may overprice them, but you're going to have to make that decision. Is it worth your time? Can you get them to adjust?
So the lease listing agreement and the tenant representation agreement don't have limits on them,
In terms of what?
like they do as far as the representation period, or like the listing is 1 year, right? And then for the buyers is 3 months on the contract.
Okay. Yeah.
The
So
leases-
the tenant representation has no limitation?
doesn't have any, which is strange.
Yeah, it's very interesting, huh? That's very surprising. I didn't know that. Let's see. And then, of course, the question is, how will it really work? How will buyers agents get paid? Well, we've kind of discussed that. They're going to get paid by you, Mr. Buyer, or you, Mr. Tenant, or we're going to ask the seller to pay your commissions, or it's possible we can negotiate with the listing agent, and the listing agent will pay the agent's commissions. If the listing agent has agreed to pay commissions or share or cooperate with commissions with the selling agent or the leasing agent, that must be fully disclosed to the seller or property owner that you are paying the other agent representing the tenant or buyer a commission. So there's information about the Big Bear MLS going on, or already, and they've already implemented this, which is interesting. I wish I knew there's someone up there to see how it's going. And then if I'm already working with an agent, will I have to sign a new agreement after August 17th? For us, it's August 13th. Buyers will need to sign a contract with the agents they're working with, and sellers may need to amend their listing agreement to make sure it complies with the settlement agreement. So once again, if you have a listing contract and there's an offer of compensation required to be placed on the MLS to the cooperating broker, you must amend that listing contract because you can no longer offer compensation on the MLS. So that's the reason for the amendment, assuming you're offering compensation, the seller is, to the cooperating broker. And it talks about fees. You can structure anything you want per se, right? And then let's see, I've got a couple of other things just highlighted here before we finish. Oh, do I have to sign something to attend an open house or tour a new development's model home? So I need to sign paperwork before I can contact the agent for a home listed in the MLS. So use the listing agent. You're going to have some options. You can have an OHNA, an open house advisory signed by everyone that attends. That's a potential buyer. And it asks for the name, email address, and if they're working with a broker, you can actually, if you want to, not that I would suggest it, you can allow somebody into the property without signing anything, but that could imply that you now developed an agency relationship. So there are implications associated with that. And I can just see some dirtbag attorney walking in and not signing anything and then claiming that you have given me information, you're acting as my agent. So there's always lawsuits associated with American Disabilities Act constantly, right? Flagrant lawsuits, so I can see things like that happening. So the suggestion is you have the open house advisory sign, OHNA, at the door. You're going to be allowing people into the property unattended. When I say unattended, with an agent, but you not being there. In your listing instructions, you should be suggesting that any buyer that walks in there signs that form. They may not, but let's ask for that information. Let's make sure that we're making the effort to comply with all these guidelines so nobody can come back to us. Not only that, if we want to get the buyers' names and email addresses anyways. And I'd say a lot of people, buyers agents that are taking their clients through open or property, don't know the guidelines anyways. So let's get the buyers' names and email addresses if we can. And then you can also have a limit of PSRA, and that is property showing and representation agreement. This is a limited form of a buyer representation agreement. You can specify one property. If I'm sitting in open house and somebody is interested in regards to the open house, I think an approach might be, and this is something Jeff Dreyer told me, he started going through a list of 8 different items, which I can't remember, about all the pertinent things about the property. He said, if I were your agent, I could tell you what the property tax rate is, what the HOA dues are, what the schools are in the area, all these pertinent facts, but I can't because I'm not representing you. If you want me to represent you for this one property, you can sign this right now. The other option is if they sign that sign-in sheet, the OHNA, it specifies on that form that I'm only acting in the interest of the seller, and any information I give you is in the best interest of the seller, and I can disclose anything you tell me to the seller. But I don't know if we want to do that. I think it's going to be a real technique that's developed. And then you also have the form BRBC, which is a buyer representation broker commission agreement, which can give you exclusive or non-exclusive representation rights. So those are different options. But at minimum, there should always be a sign-in sheet at every single property you have listed. And this article talks about that. So that's something that I think that's very important. If people are willing to read this, they're going to have an idea. So there's nothing that I'm talking about that they should not be familiar with, because there are so many sources of this information. And then it talks about some other real estate companies drafting their own forms. I think there's always a way to dispel something that's proprietary in nature. I'll tell you, for me, it's difficult for me to read a proprietary contract from a builder or from a landlord such as this building, because the details go on and on and on. You don't know exactly what to look for. So my suggestion would be, if there are people concerned about signing the CAR forms and they're talking about proprietary contracts that are developed, they may not be in the best interest of that consumer. Have they had it evaluated? So you can bet that every form that the CAR is dispersing is being looked at by the opposing enemy to be sure that it's favorable to the consumer, or at least fair. So I think that's something else to give consideration to. And then just something else I wanted to touch upon before I wrap it up. I wanted to find this article. This article, new homes won't cure housing woes. So in this article, because people are always asking, are prices going to go down? People are waiting for years now, right, for the fallout of the real estate market. It hasn't happened. And this article is suggesting that all the homes that builders are building are larger now than they have been. There's cost-effective aspects associated with that. Most lenders tend to prefer homes that are more of a luxury type of product. So they're more likely to finance these housing tracts as opposed to smaller homes. Yes, the revenue per square foot may be less, but it's a more profitable type of product for builders. So in essence, still housing prices are going up. Nothing is going down in terms of price. And this is suggesting housing supply, and this guy Lancer is not always favorable for the real estate industry. Housing supply is not the only issue here. And that there are a lot of people here, we see it constantly with new homes, they're all being sold. Nothing is just standing on the market. It is for a short period of time. So if people are wondering what's going to happen and they're trying to get into the marketplace, yeah, all new homes are exceptionally expensive, and it's the underlying cost is not really disclosed to a buyer, because to landscape it, to amenitize it, to look like a model, it's going to cost you a lot more money. But that's the only new product I really see on the market right now. It's just expensive new homes. And what's that going to do? It's going to continue to draw up the lowest values of any other properties that are priced below that. So if anyone's looking for market interpretations, mine is prices aren't going down anytime soon. It's going to take a long time before we see any type of relief at anything. And now we're starting to see rates come down a little bit. That's just going to put more pressure on, because there are a lot of buyers that are waiting out there. Any questions before I ask Sarah? Sarah, do you have that information that we talked about?
Hi, Rich. Yes, I do.
Thank you.
So Rich had asked me to share with you guys what is allowed as a seller concession. And so for anyone who doesn't understand a seller concession, it's basically a credit that the seller would be giving to the buyer. And those credits will go towards the closing cost and the prepaids. And it is important to note that the closing costs and prepaids cannot, the concession cannot exceed the amount of the closing costs and prepaids. So for example, if a seller concession is going to be $10,000 and the closing costs and prepaids only total up to $8,000, that $2,000 difference cannot go back to the buyer. So that's where you'd want to work, with the loan officer to make sure that the full credit is utilized. But one of the things I'm going to share with you guys is that there is a cap on the amount of concessions that the seller can give, and it does depend on the occupancy of the property and the amount of the down payment. So on a conventional loan, a seller can give up to 3% concession for an LTV greater than 90%. If the loan to value falls between above 75% and below 90%, they can give up to 6%. And this is the percent that I'm giving you guys. It's based off of the sales price or the appraised value, whichever one is lower. And then on a primary residence, if you're putting down 25% or more, a seller can give up to 9% commission. And I know that, Jim had asked the question if a lender is allowed to, pay for any of the commission. And basically, the typical response is no, because for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guidelines, the seller's commission is paid by the seller. So it's not ever been a charge that would be given to the buyer. So in a case like this, if the buyer is now being asked to pay for the commission, we as the lender will look at that as part of their closing costs. And if the seller was going to give a concession towards the buyer's closing cost, like everyone's saying, everything is, it could change the way that the loan is being structured. So for example, if the seller's concession, sorry, let me back up. If the buyer is now paying the seller's or the buyer's agent commission, that is considered part of the closing costs. And the seller's concession would take that into consideration. Does that make sense, Rich?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And so what I can do is I can send this chart out to Carlos and have him email it to you guys.
That would be great, because you'll be able to see what the maximum concessions are that are acceptable to a lender.
Correct. And then just to give you guys a quick rate update, rates have improved quite a bit. There was a rate increase today, but we're seeing them, coming down. I don't know for sure how long it'll stay that way. But on a conventional loan for a scenario of 75% loan to value, a 760 credit score, the rate range is between 5.875% to 6.125%, and that is with 1 to 0 being charged. Yep.
That's much better, Sarah.
Yeah. A high balance loan. So this is anything above 766,550, all the way up to 1,149,825 for Orange County. The rates are ranging between 6.125 to 6.625, again with 1 to 0 points being charged. And then a jumbo loan. So this is anything above 1,149,825. The rates are ranging between 6.875 to 7.25%. And that is with about a half a point to 1 point being charged.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Any questions for Sarah? No? All right. Thanks for attending, everybody. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.